Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my rant on the 2003 direct-to-video horror sequel, The Hitcher II. I've been waiting. And if you are looking for a quality or entertaining sequel to The Hitcher, you will be waiting until your body and your bones turn to dust because you're not going to get that with The Hitcher 2. Because this film reeks like rotten roadkill left on the side of the road for days. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this sequel, I would like to give a special shout out to Steven for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Hitcher 2 is directed by Louis Morneau, who, in my opinion, has a filmography that is full of mostly misfires, but there's some moments where he actually delivered and he actually did some good direction, like Carnosaur 2, Final Judgment, and Bats, and as well as, some parts of Retroactive with uh, Jim Belushi. But most of his filmography is efforts that are similar to this, below average, and mostly inadequate. This is the kind of film that features some direction that is very uninspired, very dull, definitely doesn't have that much energy to it or liveliness. Very lethargic, very lazy most of the time in terms of the framing or the shot selection or the camera techniques. Every now and then you'll have a pan or a zoom or a tracking shot that is adequate, but most of the time you either don't get them, or when you do get them, they don't really make very much sense when it comes to the context of the scene. There isn't much impressive at all with the direction, except for maybe a couple moments near the end with a plane and a semi truck. Most of the time, it's just typical tired directing you've seen in a million other direct to video cheap movies by a ton of other directors. There's not really much in terms of like any sort of style or flair when it comes to the direction either, unless you consider uh, making the film look like it was shot with a piss filter, very stylish. Or something that is worthy of genuine flair. But if it's not, then no, you don't get anything like that either. He also doesn't really get the best performances out of his cast. Most of the acting in this is bad. And yeah, it's just really not a film directing wise that is that dynamic, that atmospheric, that moody. It's just something that looks very generic and very lame. And I know the director can do better because he's shown that with other films like Bats in particular, which he did before this. So the fact that he basically just went on cruise control with this is really disappointing. Uh, and as bad as the direction is, though, it's miles better than the script by Molly Meeker, Charles R. Meeker, and Leslie Sharf. Like, this is a script that is so bad that it's sickening. Like, it really is. It makes you sick to your stomach because the combined efforts of these writers is the equivalent of barf. It's just vomit left baking in the sun in the middle of the fucking desert. So this is not only a script that is a bad sequel to The Hitcher, but it's also a really half-assed remake of The Hitcher at the same time. So it's the worst of both worlds. Now, it starts out 15 years after the events of the first film, and Jim Halsey is now a police officer, And of course, you got to do some bullshit where now he loses his job as a cop because he shoots some pedo because he thought he thought that he had a gun, and so he shoots him dead. But because of that, he winds up losing his job, and now he's depressed and he's sad and he's lost everything. He gets a call from Captain Estridge, who tells him to go visit him in Texas, and he agrees to do so and takes his girlfriend Maggie along with him, and they go on another road trip, and then they encounter another mysterious hitchhiker. And the screenplay is like insinuating that this new Hitcher named Jack could be a reincarnation of the Hitcher from the first movie, Rutger Hauer's character, but it's never really firmly established. It's never really fully explained that that's the case. It's just very vague and kind of brought up that it might be. And it doesn't make any sense either way. Like, okay, if he is a reincarnation, that's dumb. If he is something else, like if he's a son of the of Rucker Howard, that's silly. If he's just some random psycho, that's just that makes more sense. But doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in terms of why he really has such a boner for Halsey, of all people, when he could have picked anyone else or anyone who was even driving on the road that day. But that is honestly the least of the script's problems. Like that whole vague, wishy-washy, lazy approach to who Jack is nothing in comparison to the rest of the script and how bad a lot of elements in this film are ultimately handled. Uh, this is just a wreck. This is a script that is just a total piece of junk. And there's really not much redeeming about it at all. In fact, it's more of a slap in the fucking face to fans of the first film than anything else. Because not only does Estridge die an undignified death off screen, but so does Jim. So, yeah, you actually, if you like the first film, oh, you know what you get with the sequel? You get to see Jim Halsey get shot by a Jake Busey and die. Now, prior to Estridge and Jim dying, they wind up running into this new hitcher named Jack, and that's while they're driving in the middle of a dust storm. It's like 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, and they see this guy with a motorcycle helmet who's on the side of the road asking for a ride. Jim understandably was like, hell no, I'm not picking this guy up. His girlfriend though was like, you gotta pick him up, you can't just leave him there. I'm like, we're in the middle of a dust storm. It's like 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. We need to get to Estridge's before shit gets too dangerous. And we get stranded out here in the middle of a Texas highway in a dust storm. Who gives a shit about this guy? No, I'm not picking him up. But she forces the issue and winds up letting him in their car. Jim is understandably freaked out by this guy and getting PTSD because it's another hitcher and he didn't have a good experience with a hitchhiker 15 years ago in Texas. And he ultimately kicks this guy out of his car. His wife argues with him about it, but he's like, no, I did the right thing. This guy's a psycho. Of course, he turns out to be right. Maybe his girlfriend should have listened to her boyfriend Jim, who is a cop. I'm pretty sure he knows who can be trusted and who cannot be, thanks to his experience as a cop and also his experience with hitchhikers. Which I'm really surprised that his new girlfriend never knew anything about it, and Jim never mentioned it to her uh, during all the time that they've been together. But, if that happened, then we wouldn't get useless, unnecessary, stupid drama between the two. And they wind up getting pulled over by a cop because they were speeding. And then Jack shows up and shoots the cop uh, and starts chasing them in an 18-wheeler because he stole this 18-wheeler from this truck driver and killed the truck driver. And Jim and Maggie, they wind up throwing him off the car because he winds up getting out of the 18-wheeler and starts trying to go after them some more. And they're driving away, and he's on the front of the car, and they get him to fly off. And then they head to Estridge's. And this new hitcher, Jack, calls the local police in the most unconvincing way possible, sounding like he's making a prank call. And he's telling them about a tip about how there's these two people that he heard that were gonna go to Estridge's and kill him. This couple. And because the local police are a bunch of brain dead morons, they just buy this guy's story and go over there. And of course, by the time that Jim and Maggie go to Estridge's farm, Captain Estridge and his wife are dead already. They were killed by the new hitcher. And the cops show up. The new hitcher starts firing shots at the cops. Cops start firing back. The new hitcher tries to shoot Maggie, but Jim gets in the way and he takes the shots instead. Maggie then takes Jim's dying body and drags him into this van, and they escape from the cops. And then Jim dies in the middle of the fucking desert. Uh, and it's not something that, in my opinion, is clever. It's not something that really adds much to this movie. It honestly just makes it so much worse because now it's a really bad sequel to the first film because it just undoes everything that Jim did in the first film and everything that Jim went through with Ryder. So it just made it all completely pointless in the end because he dies in the middle of the Texas desert 15 years later anyway. And of course, he dies a loser too because he got disgraced from the police department and got suspended, and he doesn't even really wind up taking out the new hitcher. He doesn't really wind up doing anything in this other than having PTSD and then dying in the desert. Such a fitting and wonderful way for Jim Halsey to go out, isn't it? Isn't it? And not only that, Estridge also dies in such a shitty fashion too. So you not only get one instance where the writers of this sequel decide to fuck you in the ass if you're a fan of the first movie, but you also get two fuckings, two ass fuckings for the price of one. And so after this point, now it's just a very generic, incredibly boring, and dumb stalk and slash movie where Maggie is being stalked by Jack, and Jack is doing a lot of the same stuff that Ryder did to Jim in the first film, where he's putting him through this gauntlet, putting her through this gauntlet, trying to get her to kill him. But the way that it's set up, it's so dumb and inane because it's all predicated around Maggie becoming a prime suspect for all these murders and these killings, primarily because the cops are incompetent and stupid. They buy everything that Jack says whenever it comes to him making these phone calls. They never think that he could be lying. They never think that it could be a prank. They never think that it could be suspicious that the same guy is calling us multiple times before crimes happen. They never think to actually check this guy's records when you have that whole ridiculous scene when he cuts his finger off and acts like he was working at this local diner slash convenience store and was attacked by Maggie. Maggie gets arrested. Jack tells this story that's clearly a bunch of lies, and the cops just buy it, hook, line, and sinker. They don't even check his records. They check Maggie's records, see that she has no prior uh, run-ins with the law, but they never check this guy's record. I'm pretty sure this guy has a long rap sheet. Nope, they don't do that. Also, they don't check Jim's records. They don't look into things. They don't look into the fact that 15 years ago, a similar situation happened with a random hitchhiker who was killing people and then trying to pin it on this other guy who happens to be Jim Halsey, by the way. Uh, and he's now back in Texas, and this is happening all over again. Maybe we should not automatically assume that this woman is the killer because it seems like the same shit that happened 15 years ago is happening again. But no, these cops are morons and idiots and don't even bother to even do the minute amount of investigating other than just looking at this one woman's records and rap sheet and then just finding all this evidence that's conveniently there that ties her to the crime in the most ridiculous and unbelievable way possible. But no, that's absolutely 100% the truth. It has to be her. It can't be this crazy wacko guy who shows up with a finger cut off and talks about how somebody cut his finger off with a tomahawk and then threatened him at gunpoint. It sounds fucking stupid. That sounds so absurd that somebody would like actually hold you at gunpoint and then be like, "Oh, now second thought, I'm not going to shoot you. Instead, I'm just going to cut your finger off and let you run away." What? So this new Hitcher is continually trying to screw over Maggie. He captures her at first, leaves her in an old rickety water tower. She escapes, gets out of that, gets into the 18 wheeler, goes and tries to find the Hitcher, but of course she keeps running into the guy, or the guy keeps finding her, or she keeps finding the body count that he's leaving behind, which then is tying her to the crimes. She gets arrested. She's gonna get sent to jail, but then the Hitcher shows up and breaks her out of the van, the prison van, leaves the keys and a gun. Uh, she gets out, she goes and finds a plane and steals it from these mail carriers. And that whole bit, I'm like, okay, I don't mind the idea of a plane versus a semi truck, but what about the crop dusting plane that you flew to Texas to begin with? Why can't you go and get that? Why did you have to steal somebody's mail carrier plane? What, did that plane just disappear into thin air? So she steals this mail carrier plane, and there's this standoff between a semi and a plane, which is a fun idea. But the way that it's executed is kind of sucky. Honestly kind of boring because it's just constant. There's just multiple scenes of the plane flying towards the semi and then narrowly flying by it, and then it just repeats that like multiple times until the hitcher shoots some shotgun blasts into the plane and incapacitates it enough that Maggie winds up crashing the plane into the semi. And then after that, she's got the Hitcher cornered. She hits him with a crowbar, ties him up with rope in between the semi and the trailer. So then she's gonna like, find a way to make them move apart so that'll pull him apart, like what happened to Jennifer Jason Leigh's character in The Hitcher. So that was a kind of a nice callback, a fun bloody, gory way to take out the Hitcher. And there's some cops that show up though, and they let him out. They let him off of the ropes, and he grabs the gun, shoots the cops. The cops also wind up winging the Maggie in the leg again, but she winds up getting the shotgun and blows up the Hitcher and the semi. Uh, because there was some gas that was leaking from the semi, and so she shoots the 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 semi and blows it up and blows the Hitcher up into a bunch of bloody pieces. And half of the demise of the Hitcher is practical, and it's kind of some pretty decent effects because he gets blown up and you see his body parts that are on fire fall to the ground. But part of it is really fake looking CGI. So only part of that scene looks good. But I'll give it that. It's a fun way, an inspired way to take out the Hitcher. Wish it was in a better movie than this piece of shit. But yeah, I mean, and then it's over. And you're kind of like, okay, well, she killed the Hitcher, but she was not exonerated of anything. She's still considered to be a prime suspect for all these killings. Now the guy who did the killings is dead, and honestly, it kind of seems like she's probably going to get arrested later and get convicted for all these murders. So it's not really necessarily as happy of an ending as it seems, because at least in the first film, and I keep saying original because this is at points very much a remake. At least in the first film, Jim was exonerated. They caught the Hitcher, and so he was cleared of his involvement, and he was cleared of the crimes. But that never happens with poor Maggie. She's never cleared of anything. So she just gets the raw deal by the end of this movie. The cast, it's not much better in comparison to the script in terms of the quality. C. Thomas Howell delivers a really bad performance in this. Most of the time, it looks like he's just given a stink face and just completely not wanting to be there, just sleepwalking through his scenes with not much energy or passion. Just a really weak performance by him. Kari Whurer is, I would say, kind of all right, but kind of bad. Definitely a mixed bag of a performance, if you ask me. Some of her line delivery works, some of it's pretty pathetic, and it's definitely not, in my opinion, her shining hour. But I've seen worse from her. But it's also one of those things too. Like, what can she really do with such a bad script? Jake Busey is a fucking joke as Jack. Might as well call him Jerk or Jerk Off. uh, the new Hitcher. He is just completely unbelievable in this role. You don't buy him as an intimidating, creepy presence like Rucker Hauer was in The Hitcher. It's laughable. And him trying to be this mastermind is equally as ludicrous and something you don't buy in any capacity because he can't even make that work when it comes to him being the guy who's calling the cops and doing all of his stuff and and not really confessing, but telling the cops his story about what Maggie did to him and cut his finger off. It's not even remotely believable. It's the kind of bullshit performance that just makes it sound like the guy's lying and he's not to be trusted. And it's either because that's all that Jake Busey could do, or he's just a clueless performer who doesn't know how to handle this character and do this character any sort of justice. Like this was just I mean, it was such a massive step down for Rucker Hauer. It was honestly stunning when it comes to the steep decline in quality from Rutger Hauer's writer to Jack the Jerkoff in The Hitcher II, played by Jake Busey. The rest of the cast, I mean, you got Jane Mortill as Sergeant Kibble, Mackenzie Gray as a lieutenant, Sean Johnson as Sheriff Castillo, Steve Railsback as a deputy in an uncredited role. And Steve Railsback was actually pretty good in the scene that he was in, but then he gets shot by the Hitcher, and then he's gone. So like the best actor in the entire movie is in it for like 2 minutes before he gets shot to death. So yeah, this was a pretty awful cast, and the cinematography by George Meridian. It was a total miss. This film looked really bad on more than one occasion. It looked like it was covered in piss. It really did. It was all brown and dingy and piss colored. The editing by Glenn Garland was anything but great. This wasn't good editing. This was definitely a typical below average, piss poor effort from an editor for another direct to video crap fest of a sequel. And the music by Joe Kramer, this score was really repetitive and boring, and was nowhere near as memorable or as strong or as eerie as the score from The Hitcher. It didn't even sound like it belonged in the same movie. It just sounded like the typical type of score you've heard in a bunch of other direct-to-video thrillers from around the same period. It didn't even sound like a score that belonged in a horror film. I mean, it's not even paced tightly. It's like an hour and 20 something minutes without the end credits, and it still feels longer than that because it's not engaging, it's not interesting, it's not compelling in the slightest. The characters that you do like from the first film get screwed over. The Hitcher himself is a joke. There isn't anything in terms of the gore or the kills that is fun or memorable or interesting or unique. Uh, and other than a bit with a plane and a semi and the Hitcher getting blown up in the end, there's nothing that crowd pleasing or that fun or that entertaining about it either. This movie's about as entertaining and engaging of a experience as being stuck in the desert for days, just wandering around with nothing but tumbleweeds blowing past you, and the sun beating down on your face while you sweat profusely and are begging for a drink of water, and you're having hallucinations in the distance. And in this instance, you're having hallucinations of a better movie. You're looking at the flashback footage from The Hitcher, and you're thinking, oh, The Hitcher, it's such a good movie, it's right there, I could see it, and then it disappears and you're left with The Hitcher II, and you're left with the realization that what you saw when it comes to thinking that you were watching The Hitcher was that it was all a mirage, and you were instead watching The Hitcher II, I've been waiting. But anyway, thanks for watching my rant on The Hitcher II, I've been waiting. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.